Hi guys, Amores here. Today we are dealing with the out-of-control USB mouse that is trying to ruin our Windows 98 experience on modern hardware. Well, I have some good news. By using some older driver, we can get our mouse back in business. I found this workaround a while ago. I didn't keep it secret. However, my solution is not yet well known and I still see many unresolved topics about this crazy mouse issue. Before we settle things with our mouse, since I get asked a lot how I managed to install Windows 98 in the first place, using modern hardware of course, I'll show you how I did it. First using Intel Skylake hardware, and if this is not modern enough, at the end of the video this initial Windows installation will be transplanted from Intel Skylake directly to Intel Raptor Lake hardware using a 13th generation Core i3 CPU. And now a 5-minute guide on how to install Windows 98 2nd edition while using a SATA SSD and some pretty modern hardware. First, we have to prepare a bootable DOS drive. We start this operation by creating a FAT or FAT32 partition. The fastest way to do it is to use a disk management tool provided by Windows. This must be the first partition on the drive and not bigger than 32 gigabytes if we go with FAT32 standards. Let's make sure that this partition is made active. This job requires only 2 clicks when using this management utility. Later, we can use the rest of the drive for another Windows installation. Even Windows 11 can be installed just fine along with a FAT32 partition. Now, let's copy on this freshly made partition just what is needed to click the Start button for the first time without specific drivers or any other software. So we need, of course, Windows 98 installation files, cregfix, a patch made by low-level programmer Minsuki. For this particular job, Windows 3.1 installation kit was also copied. And depending on hardware, PATCHMEM by Rudolf Law might be required, but we may want to use this patch anyway. Next, we have to make a DOS bootable USB stick, which is easier than it sounds. This step requires some USB stick, Unetbootin, and a Windows 98 boot floppy image, which can be easily downloaded from allbootdisks.com. We simply upload this boot image file into Unetbootin, and that's it. Now we have a USB stick that acts like a bootable floppy. At this point, just let me rewind a little, we connected the SSD with Windows 98 installation files and required stuff to a new computer, and the USB stick was picked as a boot device. Now we have to run a sys command from the A drive, which is the USB stick in this case. We simply type sysc colon and a system transfer message will show up. This means that our SSD drive will be able to boot into DOS at the next restart, of course. Before restarting, we should put in charge HiMemSys as memory manager, or else Windows Setup will complain about insufficient memory, especially when using modern hardware. So we copy HiMemSys and edit.com from the A drive to the root of C drive. Then we type edit config.sys and we add this line device equals himem.sys/m:1. We save the file and now we are good to restart. So far so good. Now we navigate to Windows 98 installation folder and we type setup/pi. If we don't add this switch, the PCI bus won't be installed. This is not a big deal. If we forget, we can install it manually later. The first part of Windows 98 setup always works, no matter what hardware we use. Our installation will be halted right after the first restart, and this is totally expected because our computer has more physical RAM than Windows 98 can handle. No problem, we can configure Windows 98 to use a fixed amount of RAM and ignore anything about a certain value. This operation requires a restart and a quick edit of a system.ini file which resides in a Windows folder. Once we are inside the system.ini file, under 386 enhanced section, we add this line max fizz page equals 20,000. This setting will limit our RAM to 512 megabytes. Typically, we should add another entry regarding a file cache, but this setting is not as critical as this one. Now we can restart, or simply we can type win, and depending on our hardware configuration, either we move on or we get another error. On this Intel Skylake configuration, we did get the error, of course. I won't go into details. We can simply move on with the installation by running PATCHMEM by Rudolph Law. This operation requires a restart. PATCHMEM was copied earlier into the root of our bootable drive, so simply typing PATCHMEM will do the job. From now on, the setup should be completed without further errors. Let's see. Indeed, no more errors. Now setup is detecting my DVI to USB capture card, which acts like a monitor as far as Windows 98 cares. Now let me install some drivers so we can deal with the crazy mouse in 60 million colors, of course. As you can see, installing drivers and updates didn't impress our stubborn mouse. We just have to move it a little and things will go crazy on the screen. The good news is that the keyboard works fine, so we can navigate to the control panel where we have to change our mouse type from standard PS2 to Logitech PS2. If you forgot how to navigate with a keyboard, tab key is the most important since it allows you to jump from one item to another. Also, holding the Alt key plus the underline letter from a button will activate that exact button. Now we have to pick a PS2 Logitech mouse type. It doesn't really matter what model. What we want is that Windows to load LMOUSE.DRV, where L is from Logitech. And now, guess what? Our mouse is still out of control, but things are about to change once we are going to replace Logitech mouse driver that just got installed with its older version that came with Windows 3.1. We had to install a Logitech mouse driver first, or else there is no LMOUSE file that can be replaced. We cannot make this operation while Windows is running, so we have to restart in MS-DOS mode or use our bootable USB stick once again. Since I have Windows 3.1 installed on the same partition as Windows 98, I can copy the file directly from Windows 3.1 system folder. Of course, you don't have to install Windows 3.1 or use the expand command to extract this file from the installation kit. You'll find a link to LMOUSE.DRV into description. Now we press the Y key to confirm the file overwrite, and that's all we have to do in DOS. And now we are back to Windows, and guess what? We have a fully functional mouse using an older Logitech driver. Well, Windows is rather suspicious about our mouse. It will have a hello exclamation mark in the control panel, but for sure it is working. By the way, when I said fully functional, I meant a basic two-button mouse. Scroll wheel won't work, neither any extra buttons. So far, this was a typical Windows 98 installation procedure that can cover most of the hardware released after Windows 98 support ended in the summer of 2006. But if we plan to use the latest generation hardware, we have to deal with an extra error, the big cache Windows protection error. This error will show up during the installation, or if we plan to use an existing Windows 98 installation drive, like I'm about to do. This is of course the same drive that we have used until now, and we are about to see the vcache error. No problem, cregfix will solve this error. We have to load this patch via autoexec and at the next restart, Windows 98 will boot just fine. To load cregfix, we simply have to type the path to the file, and the cregfix was copied earlier into the root of a C drive, so there is no much typing involved. Since it's a new motherboard, Windows 98 will discover all the PCI devices once again. If we are asked to restart, we press cancel and continue until we see the desktop. If we have drivers, we can provide them right now, like I'm doing for this sound card from Realtek ALS 4000. And now we have Windows 98 running on an Intel 13th generation CPU, which is almost the latest generation. Now we have to go back to our mouse discussions because on this motherboard, emulation didn't work at all with Windows 98. It worked in DOS since I was able to edit AutoExec but in Windows, emulation is dead, so we don't get any signals from our mouse and keyboard. This motherboard has a plan B for this situation. I mean, there are two PS2 ports available and I did use both of them. And you have to believe me that a fresh install won't solve this issue. Actually, I started the installation on this newer Intel Raptor Lake configuration, but since there was no crazy mouse situation, but a completely dead mouse and keyboard, that's why I restarted the installation with the courtesy of a Core i5-6500 CPU, and I could show you how to get a functional mouse. Anyways, what can we do if we don't get any input, especially from our keyboard in DOS? Well, first we have to make sure that our mouse and keyboard are emulated by the BIOS as being PS2 devices. This emulation is usually enabled by default. If not, we should enable any options related to USB legacy. If this won't solve our problem, what other options do we have to get a functional mouse and keyboard when using modern hardware and older operating systems? First of all, we can deal with this issue at the hardware level by simply using a PS2 mouse, or as a last resort, a serial mouse. If we don't have a serial port on the back, our motherboard should have a serial header. I actually have a Microsoft cordless wheel mouse, both serial and PS2 compatible. And literally, this mouse works in every Windows, including the very first Windows released in 1985. The next best move is to get a PCI Express USB 2 card, which will bring full USB support not only for Windows 98, but also for Windows 2K, XP, and Vista. By the way, these operating systems won't use emulated mouse or keyboard at all. Finally, we can take a software approach to solve this issue. Not only that is free, but if we use a laptop, it's like the only choice we have, unless we want to take it apart. First of all, we can use a third-party USB patch made for Windows 98, which can enable generic USB support on various chipsets up to Intel Haswell. This is the fourth gen released in the summer of 2013. If our motherboard uses a newer chipset, this patch won't work, so it's better to forget about it. The last option is to change the PS2 standard mouse driver with a Logitech mouse driver for Windows 3.1 using the method I described earlier. I discovered this workaround while installing Windows 3.1 when I saw that my USB mouse was working perfectly fine under Windows 3.1 while using the exact same hardware as Windows 98. This got me thinking, what can go wrong if I'll replace Windows 98 mouse driver with the one from Windows 3.1? Well, nothing bad happened. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Soon we can celebrate 25th anniversary of Windows 98 second edition. There will be a special video with this occasion, so stay tuned to this channel.